We have with us two guest presenters who will take us through not only the thinking around our project. By the way, this work is part of the project on redesigning blended courses that SILT is leading. And as part of that project, we are looking into issues of accessibility and inclusivity, so that as we redesign our courses, particularly now that SILT is helping us to migrate courses to Amathuba, the new learning management system, then we could be doing that with inclusivity and accessibility in mind. We have with us two guest presenters, Benedict Kumalo, who is one of the EdTech advisors with SILT, who is leading also in the area of accessibility research, as well as Ike, who is with IDEA, and he is convening an MPhil in disability studies. We also have with us our lead project manager, Janet Small, as well as other EdTech advisors, some of whom will join. Thanks, Ken. We have with us also another EdTech advisor, Phil Dambisia, who will be helping us with projecting the slides and any other work that we are doing, so that we begin to be building an evolving community around issues of inclusivity and accessibility. We are inviting all who are with us here to briefly introduce who they are in the chat so that we could continue this discussion. And anything else, Janet, before we get started?
That sounds great. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Benedict, are you ready now to get us started?
Yes, Tula. I am.
Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Greetings, colleagues. As I've said earlier on, sincere apologies. I am using a completely different, not a new computer, but I'm at the disability service. So this computer I'm using, one can just say that it was clearly meant for somebody like me who's blind, because the camera is not working. So you will not be able to see my face, but I'm sure you are able to hear me. So today is the second day of our webinar, and it is the last, hopefully, of many that will come. So last week we began by looking at academic ableism and ways of dismantling academic ableism, because what we have realized, or I have realized since my interaction with the ETAs and being part of SILT, is that sometimes when we talk about accessibility and inclusion, the problem does not only lies in the accessibility of the materials, but it's rather how the entire structure of the education system is designed tend to be a bit more exclusionary for students with disabilities, and not only students with disabilities. So last week we had three speakers who articulated some of the barriers they encountered, they experience as they continue with their studies. So today, what Ike and I, the team, were hoping to do is to give you some a bit of demonstration on web accessibility, and also give some more information around UDL, because what we are hoping to do from now on is that we should all have what could be considered as minimum standards that we could all apply. I think there's also there's a saying that saying it takes one step to see a progress. So I would love to see this as a starting point, or maybe a start towards and inclusive practice as far as learning and teaching is concerned. So without any further ado, I am going to ask my colleague, I wonder if she's here, Yakuluntu, to give us some of the comments or such questions that might have arisen from our previous discussions. Is she here, Tula or Philip?
Philip will read the questions, Benedict.
Okay, thank you so much, Phil. What were some of the questions or inputs that came from our previous discussions?
So there was so in exploring the kind of support that has been availed, there was talk of increasing accessibility through increased engagement, the utilization of forums, of different modes to convey content, videos, voice recordings, notes, and a push for forums with clear-cut instructions, as well as tips on how to do different things. There was a particular focus on the platform that we're transitioning away from. So it was that grounding, but all in all, the focus was on support and taking it a step further, looking at accessibility in terms of the mental health support and psychosocial needs, as well as the technical and, shall I say, traditional barriers that impede the accessibility for many a student.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil. So I'm not sure, colleagues, if there's anyone to those who were here last week would like maybe to say a one or two or share their reflections after this session we had last week. Just one or two, or even if you're not comfortable to speak, you can use the chat. I believe the chat available, Phil, or is it the Jamboard? While still, I think for me, what stood out is when we were discussing and reflecting on the webinar is one of the questions, I think it came last week during the session, when one of our colleagues, a participant, asked the question whether is UDL only applicable to, I think they use the word these people, meaning that because my panelists beside Ige, they all had disabilities or impairments. So that question on its own, to me, I love the question. I was not offended at all, because it kind of made me to be aware of where we are now as society, and also how much people are willing to engage and interact. And the second was, which is, I think, the purpose of today, when somebody asks what could be the practical steps or practical elements that educators could implement to accommodate or to some sort of create ways of inclusion in a classroom. So for me, those were the two comments that stood out for me I'm not sure if there's any written statement or if there's any raise hands. I'm sorry. I mean, the device that I'm using, it does not even alert me, as you all know that with our UDL, those who attend meetings with me, you always hear that so-and-so raise hands or so-and-so has joined the meeting. But unfortunately, with this current one, I can hear who joined, but not the hands. So Phil, I'm not sure if there's any hands raised or comments on the chat.
No.
Any reflections about last week? Yes, Ike.
Yeah, so maybe let me come in and also just mention a little bit of the reflection that happened. And it was last week webinar was a good kickoff to, I would say, a little bit of sensitization in terms of the deeper implications of difference. So the deeper implications of students, staff members who do things differently, and how can we together think around barriers that they experience, and how can we then use that in terms of enabling a curriculum that is more responsive, to these different ways of knowing, of being, of co-creation, of knowledge. So what the one thing that came out strongly for me in that webinar was, that it was geared towards one size, looking around this one size, it does not fit everyone, okay? One size does not fit everyone. And if that is the case, then what are the benefits that looking at inclusive practices that helps promote ways in which different people can learn can actually help increase, not only including people who learn differently and teach differently, but also being able to help improve on the curriculum. Because the ultimate goal is that everybody is able to come to university and is able to engage to the fullest capacity that they can, to the fullness of their potential. So, so when Philip talked about mental health, psychosocial, those are differences that are not usually in the mainstream, in the curriculum. So in that way, it requires a different way of looking at students, different way of looking at the curriculum, different way of looking at the university, and different way of looking at the outcomes of our courses and what we want to achieve. So this series of webinars is actually to start a gradual journey from sensitization to now moving towards, to support, and then tools, training that academics can get. Because I know one of the things that will be in the forefront of academics' minds is, we have like a guideline or we have training, which is very important. Those things will be good. But what I've found working in the university, when you talk about difference and inclusion, I found that if one is not sensitized to the objective of why these things are being done, there's a tendency for you to move towards just like a tick box exercise, symbolic exercise, and add-on exercise. So that's what we're trying to gradually craft so that we all feel included in the process, so that it's meaningful to both staff and students. So those came out strongly for me from the last webinar.
Yeah. Thank you, Ike. If there's no one field, then we can move on. I think I completely agree with you, Ike, that one size does not fit all. I think that's what, from last week's session, even me, since I joined UDL, that's always been the case, that the way we do things is not, well, like I said even last week, that one could say that how can it be, because some of us have progressed and even the panelists have progressed, but just because people are passing and moving on, it does not mean that the system accommodates them. And I think we can move on. So that raises a question for today's presentation as to now what could be done, or what can we do from learning designers' context, even course designers, curriculum planners. How can we or is there a framework that one can think of, or is there a particular way that educators or even lecturers could do to make sure that there is this sort of inclusive pedagogies or this inclusive framework that we all desire, or to see equity in classroom? And there has been a couple of ideas around accessibility, as we have, as we have seen, or as we even, those who were with us last week, we spoke about inclusive design or universal design, which some of these were quite helpful, not even, they are quite helpful, but in some instances, they lack a smaller, let's take, for instance, one could think about accessible design, which you would see when I go through the webpage, that accessibility is there, but usability might be a problem, or it could be vice versa. The same way with inclusion, as you heard last week when I asked Gig about the retrofit, that in some instances, things were not designed, but because a person just emerged, so the plan is, how can we accommodate this person? So you retrofit, just change, you adapt quickly, just to accommodate the person who has a different needs, or who might experience difficulties in engaging with your content. So for us as SILT and under the UDL team, we promote UDL because we believe that it can create, or it enable lecturers to create flexible curriculum that can be easily accessible to all. And to all, we mean all, regardless of student abilities or disabilities. I was reading somewhere where I think there's Bex Taylor who said when she worked on a course with a blind person, and somebody asked her, how many of your students have disabilities? And her quick response was, I have no idea, which is a good thing because there were no barriers experienced by any student. All materials were accessible. There was no need for students to declare their impairments or their challenges, and which this is something I believe from our context as UDL, we wish that as learning designers and lecturers go forward, is something that they could envision doing, that to eradicate these binaries of I'm doing this for this student or for those students, or how can I accommodate this student. The plan is to ensure that all students receive information or are able to participate within their capabilities. And UDL has provided some principles. Those of you who have been with us, you might know them. Multiple means of engagement, and where the guideline there is what's the motive of the motivation behind your course, and also how do you ensure that students with different needs are able to engage or can fully understand what is the desired and multiple means of presentation, which is something for now I can say from SILT, since I've been with them for the whole year, is that I see it happening, that we found materials in different format, audios and descriptions are available, which is quite good. And the last one, multiple means of action expression, where I think this is where this we might have to rethink because of how the structure of the university is. We only, as we have heard even last week, we only use one form of assessment test. So with UDL, the plan is there a way that student could be encouraged, could be assessed, but in a way that is more suitable to their abilities or impairments. And then, okay. But as we are also within the blended learning, so I thought I should also incorporate the principles of Web Accessibility Guide because we do learning online anyway, and some research have raised issues that students with not only visual impairment, but those with socioeconomic barriers also experience difficulties during COVID. And one of the emerging challenges that came out was that the way learning and course were designed, well, one can understand, I mean, it was under COVID and everybody was panicking, and I think there was no time to rethink, but then most students were excluded from participating. So with this web accessibility content guidelines, they're gonna give you a framework of how, as you go along uploading your materials on the sites, how or what could be your guiding principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So basically what those principles reflect is that what you put on the site, it should be easy for students to access and even to engage, not to get difficulties. I can make an example of myself. When I joined UCT, there was a time when, because I did the PGDIP, so we were working on forums, which is quite good because all students are there and we can engage with our lecturers as PGDIP runs. It's a block module. So during the course of the year, you would use forum or chat. But now the difficulty for me, that experience, was that I could not engage because the course, well, I could access the other platforms, but not the forum. And it took me some time before I could go to EEC and say, look, this is inaccessible for me. But then had the designers of the web content being aware of these kind of barriers, or they thought of the operation, because with the principles of web accessibility guidelines, I could, the first one, it was there, I could perceive where I am, but then to operate, even to get to where the forum is, was so difficult, even where I could even submit the assignment. So taking all of these 4 principles, as well as the 3 principles of UDL, they create or they motivate us to rethink of multiple ways that we can allow students to learn, firstly, and secondly, to demonstrate what they've learned. But I think, let me look at the time. Oh, perfect. So now for the next couple of minutes, I'll be sharing my screen and going through the Vula page. Oh, no, sorry, the Amathuba, so that you could see the accessibility and the navigation. So I'm going to, while I'm still navigating, I'm going through. Is there any questions or any inputs from colleagues?
Thanks, Benedict. Will you maybe share the web accessibility guides or ask, or can maybe EK put a link in there for us?
I mean, EK will, yep, maybe.
Yeah, so I'll speak to some of them, Janet, just as Benedict.
Okay, thanks.
We're done, yeah, with this session. Yeah. Benedict, you're in?
Can you hear me, EJ?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, I am. Okay,
Yeah, so for those of you who might not know, so Benedict is using navigates his computer using a screen reader. So there might be delays in being able to get one or two things going. Maybe Benedict, maybe as you are getting along to sharing your screen, maybe then I can go ahead with minimum standards that you and I have come up with in terms of pedagogy and digital accessibility. While you get that going. If you're speaking, you're on mute. All right. Okay. We can see your screen. So what Ben is going to do is just to demonstrate a bit of accessibility using a screen reader on our upcoming Amathuba LMS.
When I was my meeting.
Your screen has been shared now. You can see.
I need to unmute.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Can you hear me, EJ?
Yes, yes.
Oh, perfect. Sorry. I thought I was taking a bit, I was getting confused because I mute myself. As I said, I'm using JAWS. So familiarizing myself from voiceover to JAWS. Well, you know, it's one of those things. So can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can see your screen, yeah. We can see
Benedict, before you get going, I just wanted to say to colleagues, for those of you who haven't yet seen that this is the login page for the new Amathuba learning, digital learning platform. So just for those who haven't seen it, that's what we're looking at. Thanks, Benedict.
Okay. What I would have loved, I'm not sure if you can hear the screen reader.
No, we can't. I think just explain as you move along.
Okay. I'm going to log in and
okay, we can see you and we've seen you've got logged into one of the sites.
yep. So I'm on the student orientation side. So for ease of access, I'm going to look for activities. So I'm going to use the shortcut keys. So as I'm going through this, you will realize some of the accessibility maybe problems that I might not be able to pick up, like the color and the font size. So I'm checking the accessibility. I'm going to activities. So I've opened the links that I think is a combo box for us. So I'm just going to press A, announcement. So when I press A, it doesn't give me, so it only gives me one. If then there's a problem. So I'm going to just use the arrows.
Okay, maybe so maybe I can come in here. So one of the
I am on the, okay, sorry.
Yeah, one of the accessibility features to take note of when you're creating course content using Amathuba is color contrast, and that helps a whole range of users, but particularly students who have low vision. If you have students in your class who have low vision, or students who have challenge, seeing colors, then having a high color contrast is very beneficial. So that means, as you can see on the web page now, having a white background with either sharp blue or black displayed. This makes the web content more accessible to users who have difficulty seeing colors and users who have low vision. Yeah, continue, Benedict.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing now, where I am, I can hear three things: assignments, discussions, and quizzes. I'm not sure if you can all see them.
Yes, coming in, Benedict. So what you have to know is that Benedict is navigating all these just with the keyboard. So that's something I'll speak about. What that means that when you create your course site on Amathuba, students who use screen readers, they usually use only the keyboard to navigate the site, not the mouse. Most of them are not able to use the mouse. So that means the course site you create must be so that students can navigate using just the keyboard. And Amathuba has that capability, as Benedict is showing with his keyboard. Yeah,
okay.
Continue.
So now I am going to, for, let's see, quizzes. Quizzes. So I've skipped everything because normally when one clicks the site, it takes you right on top. So there's a link that says skip to content. So I'm already here, the quizzes. I here table, 3 columns and 3 rows. So now I am on the sample quiz. That's what I've depicted. But now I'm not sure where within the table, because I could hear that there was a table with 3 columns and 3 rows. But I was not quite sure. It's not clear to me, the navigation, but anyway, that is not that important to me. What is important is that I could easily find what I'm looking for.
Yeah, you're in the sample quiz now. Will you be able to navigate to the continue quiz?
I can read the instructions.
So, participant, what you have to know is that Benedict has to wait for the screen reader to read what is on the screen. To
Yep.
know
It would be nice if I would have shared my voice then. Okay, let's continue.
Benedict, sorry, there's just a question in the chat from Lauren. She said, are we meant to hear what JAWS is reading on Benedict's screen?
Pardon?
Lauren asks that, are we meant to hear what JAWS
I
is
would have
reading?
loved them to hear, so that for a bit of understanding, because now, but as I scroll down, do you all see where am I? Because there was a time, I think Philip can pop in here, when you were saying you could not locate me, but I could see where I was.
Yeah, so we can see now that you are now in the questions category, question 1, 2, 3, 4, where you then answer the question.
Okay, question 1.
So to answer Lauren's question, I think in the Benedict, you are using your headset to listen to JAWS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Lauren, that's why we can't hear it, because it's using a headset to listen to JAWS to get feedback.
But I tried to take out my headset and use them.
I think for now, just continue as you are. So are you able to answer the questions with navigating to choose a question for those that's already been saved?
Sorry, I took out my headphones. Yes, that's all where I was heading.
Right.
It's why I say it's accessible, because it can tell me that this answer has not been answered. It has not been checked. So
Okay. So the first question shows that the first answer, has been checked. The second question shows that the first answer has also been checked.
yep. And then the third question, it has a combo box for writing something.
That's right.
So there is a accessibility feature because it says immediately once you hit that, and then there's edit. So that means when it says so, that means I can write my answer. Let's see, what can I write?
So for the third question, Benedict is demonstrating that the text box has a label. So the accessibility, the screen reader is able to read that the label, which is Turnitin, may optionally be enabled on the tool in order to check for plagiarism, and then it's entering in there. Yeah, continue.
Just even a spell check if I want to check a spell check. So yeah, but then to get out, because that's where he gave when I asked Philip, then how do I get out of this? So he said there's an X somewhere. I think this is where we were. Do you see the exit button?
I think you have to tab further down because there's still some more text. Question
I'm
4.
checking. So just give.
Question 3 is saved. Continue tabbing.
Okay, now I've got the close, but the close button, I think.
Okay.
Am I out?
It shows you're in.
Yep, I think I'm out. No, I'm not.
No.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's any more questions relating to this, but from my assessment, it looks like there is that accessibility and usability feature. However, as I've been saying to colleagues during our meetings, is that all of this I can say easily now that they are accessible, but it's only when I could have a very complete site with say assignments to download or more students to interact with, then I could fully say it is accessible. But for now, as it is, to me, it sounds as if we are ready to go. There was a time with, what do you call it, Vola. Some of the things were quite difficult even to navigate.
Benedict, that was very helpful to hear that it's got some features that are easier to navigate. But
Yep.
it also, from your demonstration, it makes me realize the importance of writing very clear instructional text rather than always relying on people to see something that might imply that you should do something, like go somewhere. So that, I don't know, that was my impression of your showing us that writing things like what you should do next would also be helpful for a screen reader.
Yep. I think what is also, I completely agree with you, Janet. What's also needed is for somebody like me to have also a video for instructions, because most of the things I had to figure it out on my own. So it would be nice if within the guidelines or the orientations, there could be a bit of orientation around screen reader users. This is what you do. These are the shortcuts and so on. Because one that is also lacking is that in most of the accessibility web pages, they will say to go to, say, for instance, assignment, press A, or that's a shortcut for assignments. Then you immediately, once I press A, it will take me there. But then here, that accessibility feature is not there. But anyways, it's not that much of a huge difference.
That's
I'm
helpful.
going to-
Thanks for the suggestion. We will make a suggestion that we create some sort of resource on the best way to navigate the sites
Okay.
with accessibility features. That's a great suggestion. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to then go to the next
Okay.
page.
Okay, not submitted. So I think it's perfect. Well, for now,
Right.
because I can hear everything that a student would need to find when they navigate on this site.
Mm.
There's the 10 indexing, due
That is-
date, and
That's good. So we will do more testing to be able to actually
Yep.
provide more context for users.
I think the next stage will be if somebody could give me an assignment to hand it in and to look at all the options for assignments.
Mm.
Yep.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
If you can,
colleagues. So I will leave it now to EJ
yes.
to take it from here.
If
I
you can
hope I've
stop.
stopped. Have I stopped?
Yes, you have stopped sharing. Yes.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Philip, you're able to go back to the slide. Philip starts with the digital accessibility part so that it just follows through from what Benedict has done. And I'll now go to pedagogy.
Okay, sharing the from the web accessibility now.
Thank you. So what I'm going to go through is it's some of the things, talking a little bit about what Benedict has just demonstrated and some of the other areas to be aware of when you are working with, once Amathuba goes live and you're working with it. Yeah, so if you can go to slide 10. All right. So, thank you. All right, so these are just, so we thought about in terms of digital accessibility, what are the minimum standards we need to start thinking around? This is in no way exhaustive. It's just a draft, start to think around this based on practices that have been happening, elsewhere, and based on experience of feedback from students with disabilities. So the first thing to be aware of as a content creator, as an academic on Amathuba, will be to use the Amathuba editor. So on a Word document you have the ribbon where you have where you can make a text bold, italics. You can insert images. That's what you call the content editor. So to use those tools in the content editor when you are actually creating content. Why is that important? Because when someone like Benedict, who uses a screen reader, is navigating the site, most times things that are not used from the content editor to create content will not be read out by the screen reader. What do I mean? So for instance, you want to put a numbered list. So you have your course content and you want to put a numbered list, number 1, number 2. So what I'm saying is that don't put it in manually. Go to the text editor on Amathuba, look for the numbered list, 1, 2, 3, then use that to be able to number the content that you want to put in. So the same thing if you're using an ordered list or an ordered, so if you're using a bullet point, because the screen reader picks up those bullet points when you use the tools provided by Amathuba. Then of course, the same thing with headings. So properly formatted headings. Headings not only serve to give very good order to your content, so students are able to know, both sighted students and students who cannot see. It gives order to how the flow of information is on your content, but it also helps a person with visual impairment because they can't see the screen. Headings, properly formatted headings, helps them to have a mental image of how your content is structured. So the same advice, use the heading styles on Amathuba to create your heading. So don't enter text in don't enter content, your heading there, and then highlight it, and then click bold or increase the font. That when the screen reader goes into that content, it will just read that content as any other content. So then the student's visual impairment loses information about the order of your content. Okay, so that is the second thing. Then I've already spoken about color contrast. Having the right color contrast, like you see this PowerPoint presentation, also very important, like I spoke about. So should be sufficient, but also try not to use color alone to convey meaning. So if you have something you want to convey to students and you want to use color to demonstrate that, also have another means to convey that information. Because if you use color alone, then those who have low vision, those who have challenges being able to work with colors will lose out on the information which you use. So Benedict, these things I'm mentioning, Benedict and I are going to try and work on them, test them on Amathuba, and then now come with, I think we'll actually do a video afterwards to demonstrate that and then show it to you. Then images. If you have images, we work with images all the time. On Amathuba, you'll be able to, you'll be able to indicate two forms of images, decorative and non-decorative. When your image is decorative, that means usually for images that really is for anesthetics. It doesn't really convey meaning that the student requires to be able to do one or two activities in your course. So then Amathuba will allow you to take that as decorative. Then when you have non-decorative text, is now when you have an image that actually conveys meaning. So if you have like a graph or something, it conveys meaning, then you need to put what you call alternative text. And Amathuba allows you to be able to do that. So you put alternative text explaining the meaning of the image so that once the student goes in with the screen reader, they get feedback from the screen reader saying exactly what that image is and any other information you want to put in terms of what they need to do with that image. So that is also very important to take note of that. I've spoken about lists, formatted and unformatted, using the editor. One aspect I want to bring in is web links. You see, normally you will see, we'll paste web links such as http://uct.ac.za.pdf/20, like, all those things. Yes, it's very good for a user who can see what's on the screen, they can click on it. But for a user who has visual impairment, that becomes very challenging. So making your web links meaningful. Vula already had that, if you remember, Vula already had that feature whereby you highlight the web link, you right click on it, and you put a descriptive information. So if the web link is to UCT website, so then the text there will be UCT website. So it's more meaningful than http://www.uct.ac.za. But if you want to give users information about the address of the web link, then put that meaningful title, then put in bracket the web link so that it serves both, it serves different users. And also students who are not disabled also talk about the usefulness of having meaningful web link, because if it's meaningful, it tells the user what to expect. So for someone who can see, it's very important for them to know what to expect. So I'm going to University of Cape Town website. I'm going to the library and health services website. So that makes it more meaningful for different users. Then Benedict has already demonstrated that's the keyboard accessibility. So it means that whatever students are able to do using a mouse, non-disabled students are able to do using a mouse, they should be able to, students who use the keyboard should be able to accomplish the same task. So as you can see, Benedict was not able to complete one or two things at the end. So that's something that will need to be looked at so that it's, students are able to complete that. But Amathuba has that functionality. So it's just for us to be able to work that out through testing to make sure that is accomplished. And how you can test it yourself as a content creator is just use your tab key. Use your tab key as you finish creating your content. Use your tab key and see if the focus of your tab goes to every section of the content which students are able to see. If that happens, that is the same way the screen reader is able to move through your content. Tables, I won't speak much about it with demonstrate, but tables is about that the order of the table that you use what you call header rows. So header rows is header rows and header columns is for the assistive technology to be able to announce the column headings. So, you know, in your table, you will usually have the heading of the column. So when assistive technology reads that out, the student is able to get a sense of which columns they're going to go into and which rows they're able to go into. Try as much as possible to avoid merged and split cells. But if you definitely have to use merged and split cells, then when you're done creating the table, use your tab key again to tab through the table and make sure that the focus of the tab goes in the same order which you want students to be able to understand your table. If that happens, that means that won't be a problem for screen reader to be able to navigate such the content. Sorry, I see a question. Just a minute. Using the editor to create content. If we have created content in Word documents and want to paste this into the site, we would then need to remove formatting and format it using the editor. Yes, that's a very good question, and that is what I would advise, because I don't think the accessibility features transfer when you're copying and pasting. So preferably, you know, you'll be able to create the content on Amathuba and then use the editor of Amathuba to format your content. Okay. Thanks, Hannah, for that question. Then second to last is if you use videos. Video captions are very important. I mean, a lot of us, how many times have we watched videos whereby it was spoken in another language and we're able to understand the content of the video because of subtitles or captions that we had on the video? So video captions not only helps students with hearing impairment, so students who can't hear what is happening, but they can see and read what is happening, but it also helps people, students and staff members who are non-native English speakers, just like I said, just like I've said. And like for me, right here, as I'm speaking to you, I have a heavy, people tell me, I have a heavy Nigerian, I'm from Nigeria, I have a heavy Nigerian accent. And that accent may be difficult for some students to be able to understand. So, but when you have captions on your video, then students who are not able to understand the accent are able to understand. And sometimes, I mean, from COVID, you would have gotten a sense that some of our students don't work in a conducive environment to be able to learn. So some of our students will be learning in noisy environments that, you know, either with family and things like that. So having captions allows them to be able to continually focus on the content because they can read through it without, you know, and be able to make meaning out of what you're saying. And sometimes even when you're traveling, if you remember, when you go to airports, because the airport's environment is usually noisy, you appreciate the value of having captions on those boards which give you information. So that's how important captioning a video is. And I think we have that, we've had that support right from the time, you know, right from VULA to be able to request for captions to be included on your video. So it's very important to try and have that. And then lastly, audio, you know, transcripts. So if you have videos, it's good to have a text conversion of that, because not only does it help, again, students with hearing impairment, it also helps people whose language is not, their first language is not English, but it also helps students who live in areas whereby they have low access to internet or slow connections. So they don't, so audio transcripts helps, information you want to convey for students to get that information without exhausting their bandwidth. So they're able to get the same information. And some students, you know, because of different students we have, some students may prefer watching the video, some students may prefer, you know, listening to audio, some students may prefer, you know, the text version of your content. Okay. So these are just minimum standards which we've thought about and which we hope can get us thinking around it as we develop this further and make it further available for the wider university community. I don't know if there's any other question for this part. If I go to this last part. Denise says, hi, Ike. Denise says, has a question. Hi, Ike and Benedict. Are there also minimum standards for posting PDF documents on Amathuba? Very good question, Denise. I'm not sure about that yet, but it's something I'll be able to check with our colleagues at SILT, and then hopefully we'll be able to. I don't know, Tula, do you have any feedback for that question?
Not yet, Ike. Lauren, Janet, would you?
I don't know, am I allowed to talk about Ally? Because that's.
What is the question, Ike?
So the question is that are there also minimum standards for posting PDF documents on Amathuba?
I haven't heard any.
Yeah.
From all the trainings now. I don't know. Maybe Janet, yeah.
No, we haven't. I think we'll have to look at that. Thanks for the question, Denise. I mean, we know that certain of the PDFs aren't, enabled in a way that makes them accessible, and I think we'll have to make that communicate that more carefully. But let's look at it. I don't know, Lauren, have you got anything to add on that?
I think she loved the meeting.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Egypt, just before we move to the next, on
yes.
the video and the transcripts, what I often find is that one could get the transcripts of the audio, so the voices in the video, but not what is happening in the video. And I found that there was an incident earlier this year when one student was referred to me to see that he's struggling to access the transcripts, and then the course convener or whoever was in charge said, but here is the transcripts. I don't know what's the problem. And he said, look, you need lesson there. And the first word that I received there was in this video, but in the transcript, that description of in this image, look at the picture on the image, on the transcripts, there was no description of the image at all. So maybe colleagues should take cognizance of that, just because transcript stays, it's not only about their voice, but it's also describing what's on the video. If there's, it doesn't have to be everything, but rather important elements that are going to be beneficial for the student learning. It can, it doesn't have to be a black man is wearing a black jean on the door. Maybe what's the significance of the man standing on the door that we described, not the whole.
Benedict, if the practice was to supply the slides along with the video transcript, would that help? Because then presumably if you're having the screen reader read the transcript, it could also read the slides, or would that
yes,
work?
that will help. Yep, that will very help. Yep.
That is a practice we try and encourage. You put up the slides and the captions if possible, if they are video material.
Yep. Yep. Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Thanks, Benedict and Janet. Yeah, that's something you've raised that is very important, Benedict, and that is alluding to the accessibility support and help and doing all these things. It's not really a silver bullet that will solve all the issues. So from time to time, human engagement is required to make sure that the important information that is conveyed in a video, maybe movements that happen or directions that happen, which the transcript may not capture, because the transcript will only capture the sound that that comes out of. So it's good to look through and make sure that is also captured in the transcripts. Yeah. Thanks for that. Dennis says, I'm thinking about locked PDF documents that are inaccessible to screen reading software. That is an area I've not talked about. So it's an area, thanks for that question, it's an area we're going to look into, and then hopefully over the time be able to get a response to you. Thanks, Daniel. That's very, very important. And Hannah says, picking up on the PDF question, I presume that we should avoid scanning copies of book chapters, which I imagine text readers can. Very accurate, very accurate. So for PDF documents, scanning a PDF document is really challenging. In fact, for a screen reader, if Benedict goes into your scanned PDF document, the screen reader will just say image. That's all it will say. So that means all the information on your PDF will be lost to the student. So you're right, Hannah. So as much as possible, to try not to put in scanned PDF documents. So you can imagine for those of you who maybe are doing postgraduate at university, I'm still a postgraduate student, and when you go onto the online library database, from databases from other universities, you often encounter such materials that are scanned. Now, once a student with visual impairment comes across that, that's already a barrier. And then they have to send the documents to our UCT disability services to convert for them. So then the time they need to wait for it to come back to integrate it into their work. So you see, it then just adds layers and layers of challenges for students who use screen reader. Paranaz says, if I'm designing an infographic, it is always best to keep text on a white background. Will the reader pick up the text on the dark background? I need to design a step-by-step infographic, and I would usually use different colors to define the steps. Very good question, Fernandez. So what you want to achieve is sufficient color contrast. That's what you want to achieve. So if having black background, let's say white text over black background is still accessible because the contrast is sufficient. So you're just making sure that the contrast between the background and the text is sufficient for someone to be able to see. I know there are tools where you can, I can't remember the number that they put in for sufficient contrast, but there are tools to do that. But normally, if the contrast is the same as when you have a white background and black text, or black background and white text, then if you're able to replicate that with any color combination you use, then that should be appropriate. I hope that answers your question. All right.
I think also, Ike, they said that, I was reading somewhere where they said for accessibility with the screen reader, if the designers of the infographic, they should use HTML and CSS. I have no idea what that is, but apparently even from the info, that makes life a bit more easier when it comes to accessibility. So in case one wants to design an infographic, they can rather use that format, HTML, CC.
Okay.
But alternatively, they should also have a word document in case, because as we work with UDL, multiple means of representation. So it might be advisable to have both in case one cannot access it. Because sometimes things are easily, like what I found with me, certain things I can easily access them with my phone than with the JAWS. So that's why I often opt for both options in case this one does not work. I can rather I will use the other format to access it.
So you're saying web content that is responsive, that means can be accessed through mobile phone and also being able to access it using a computer.
Yep.
Option. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Benedict. Okay, so Philip, you can move to the next part. So this is minimum standard for digital accessibility. Then Benedict and I just talked about this for minimum standards for inclusive pedagogy. So Philip, you can move to the next page, or to the previous one. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So here is just thinking around things which maybe you may already be doing. Okay, you may already be practicing these suggestions and recommendations, and and that will really go a long way. So we thought of it in inclusive pedagogy in terms of things you do to prepare the engagement part and then the support that comes with it. Okay, so trying to think about it in terms of how students with different learning abilities will benefit. So one is recommended videos and written materials to students where they can gain technical skills needed for your course participation. So Benedict spoke a little bit about it, in that for people with visual impairment, if a video is posted, normally there is no instruction about how do you navigate that video with your screen reader, the screen reader. Okay. How do you navigate that video with the screen reader? So it'd be good to think, around that. Then making instructions and expectations clear of activities, we've spoken about it. So making, just like Janet spoke to, that having clear instructions on your course content, so that students know exactly what to do. Because for those who can't see the screen, the only information they have is what the screen reader reads to them. Anything that is outside of that, they won't be able to get it, and in that case, it may put them at a disadvantage, being able to understand fully what you want them to be able to accomplish. Then, of course, an old age one, send necessary materials to students beforehand. I know this is time, it takes time, it takes a lot of time from us, but as much as possible, especially students with visual impairment, hearing impairment, students who are dyslexic, they usually said that when they get the materials ahead of time, it helps them to be able to formulate first questions in their mind, understand what is going to be covered, so that when they are in class, they don't feel lost where the direction of the teaching and learning is taking them. They are not lost because they've already familiarized themselves with the content. Then in terms of engagement is, Benedict has spoken about it, using UDL principles. So multiple ways for students to learn. So a combination of text, video, audio, image, and if you are explaining things on the screen, it's also good to verbalize everything that is on the screen. So if you have like an image, it's okay, describe what the image is, rather than saying, oh, there's an image to the top right of the screen, you can see that image, rather describe what that image is. Oh, you can see top right corner, there's an image of a man riding a bicycle from Kayalicha to Cape Town on a busy road, something like that. Okay. In that way, students who can see the screen are able to get that information also for them to make meaning of. So of course, we already have these going on, but it's good to have presentations that that you can record it for students to be able to go back and view information that they've missed. Okay. Multiple ways for students to demonstrate. So this provide multiple ways for students to learn is the representation part, where you provide multiple ways to present the course content to the students. But now multiple ways for students to demonstrate what they have learned. So how they're able to express what they have learned. So how they express mastery of what they have learned. So usually in university we are usually heavily skewed towards the written form of expression. So to now start considering other forms such as, you said their portfolios, presentations, a play, depending on your discipline. So start looking at considering other ways in which students can demonstrate what they know. So language is a big one, addressing a wide range of language skills as you write. So you can see here where captions may help. So it wouldn't be too much for a video to have a caption in Xhosa, that will help a student who learns best in Xhosa to be able to understand, the video, even better. So, but use plain English, spell out acronyms, define terms, avoid, or define if you use jargon, define, jargon that you use. All these things are very little, but they make a huge impact for students who learn differently, because when things are put in this way, it's usually a given that students are able to understand, but they do struggle to be able to understand what needs to be done. So make examples and assignments relevant to learners with a wide variety of interest and background. So that is where you come, in terms of the engagement with students now, so that will require you trying to know your students. So it will require you trying to know the kind of abilities your students come with, their background they come with, to be able to kind of adapt your teaching, to use examples that mirror the background where they come from, so that they're able to relate to your curriculum content. And then provide adequate opportunities to practice and time for activities, projects. And I'm sure most of us are doing this, but opportunities to be able to practice what they've done. Because imagine for a student who has gone through that, a student with visual impairment, for instance, who has gone through that activity with experiencing barriers, they need to be able to have opportunities to practice, to master what they need to do so that they can feel confident to be able to express their knowledge about it. Then when I thought about support, I thought about putting a whole host of information in there. But honestly, the one thing that came to mind, or the two things that came to my mind, was that the impact of the manner in which students are supported goes a long way. So one of them that I thought about is that, be patient when working with students with different learning styles. Know that the way in which they learn and in which they communicate is different, and then be patient in guiding them to be able to understand your content. And then second to last is also appreciating the challenges that the student encounters. Because what happens is that if that patience is not there, it's very hard for students to then communicate their challenges to you, the challenges they encounter. And if they don't communicate the challenges, then that means they will not get the optimum expression of their ability to understand what you're actually trying to get them to know. So appreciate the challenges which they come with, and then points them to the necessary resources that can help them, whichever form it is. So those are minimum, not exhaustive by any means. Those are the minimum working standards we thought about in terms of when thinking around inclusive pedagogy. And like I said before, I know a lot of us would have been doing a whole lot of things, but it's a good idea to start putting this together, we think, and to enrich a standard which we can then use as a baseline in terms of blended learning when we are working in our university. Thank you. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments to that part. If not, then we'll go to the last part. The last part is then for us to use a Jamboard. So because, like we said, this is not exhaustive. This is now for you to now enter information around, do you think we've missed? There are things which you've missed. Do you think there are things which we need to consider? Are there challenges which you have in your mind, but which you're not sure about how to go, about addressing in terms of blended online, in terms of maybe you have a challenge which you're trying to find out if UDL can help, support you and your students. Then you can put that on the Jamboard, and then we will consider that in the future webinars which we hope to bring to you. So Philip has put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. So if you, and there's also for those with smartphones, there's also a QR code there which you can scan to go straight to the Jamboard. And Benedict, and that is actually what Benedict and I had wanted to present to you today. It's very initial and preliminary work that has, but please expect more of this from us going forward. I don't know if anybody has any questions, comments.
Yep, any questions or clarification or even critique? I mean, we're at the university, so critiques are highly, to me at least, welcome.
This is not exactly a critique, but it's a suggestion to both of you. Is that, do you think it is possible for you to play around with doing a recording showing what you were doing, Benedict, with the JAWS speaker recorded? Just a little,
yes.
like, do one exercise. I think it will be very helpful for those of us who are not using it, like a screen reader, to
yes.
sort of get a sense of what that's like. So it doesn't have to be long, but if you did like a 2 or 3 minute screencast recording that, it might be really helpful.
Yep. Ignite, that's what we're thinking of doing. But earlier on, when I also spoke to Philip, I said to him, this what I did last year with Abdurrahman when we're looking for accessibility of one of the, I think, I can't remember what course it was, but we were working with Lauren. So we looked at the accessibility. So I shared a screen with them and they could hear what I'm hearing and they could also see where the inaccessibility is. So most definitely, Janet, I will do so.
Yes,
Thanks.
so yes, Janet, thank you very much. I agree. Benedict and I had thought about that, because we didn't have the time to be able to get that into the process. But that one will help colleagues in the university to be able to actually see the implications of what we've spoken about today, just like you mentioned. But also, it will also help students with visual impairment to actually hear the feedback in terms of how the course is being navigated, so that it starts to get them familiarizing them with the feedback they can expect when using Amathuba. So yeah, we're definitely going to work on that. I don't know if I think that was it. I think we will then share the information from or do we want to share it, go to the Jamboard now to look at what people have entered, or
Yep.
Oh, just 2 comments from me, Ike and Benedict. Thank you so much for the very enlightening presentation. I just wanted to comment, and Janet will help us here, on the features of Amathuba to work well with mobile devices, such that as we design the courses, as we redesign our blended courses, we become aware that we are also designing for mobile first, as Benedict, I think, commented that he can easily access a content through a mobile phone.
Tula, my understanding is that Amathuba's mobile app Pulse is actually pretty good. And so if you design well on the Amathuba site, it should render well on a mobile. I think better than what Vula did. But I think maybe we'll have to get Ike or Benny to have a look at that for us as well. I know there are a couple of things, for instance, like images don't come through on the mobile so well for announcements, because I think it's trying to minimize size and space, on the screen. So that's just a part of then making sure you use images purposefully. The point that Benedict made earlier is that don't just put an image up always for prettification, but rather for, if it is being used, it's got a particular educational purpose.
And also the other comment is from the pedagogies that you were sharing with us, Ike, because I think the current thinking is to perhaps make use of the flipped classroom. So I'm thinking that what you are sharing, that share the resources for the course prior to a live meeting or an in-person class. Then if you employ such pedagogies that like the flipped classroom, then everybody wins, I'm thinking.
Yes, definitely, because that enables it, and you then get students who are actually excited to engage, and their engagement will demonstrate that they've had the support necessary, which flipped classroom will help provide them to be able to show what they understand, what they want, what you want them to understand. Definitely, that's part of the process. It's the support that goes with that is important. Support that goes with within a flipped classroom, that the students who learn differently, they have all the necessary support to be able to engage with content. And Tula, Hannah says, as the minimum question from Hannah is, as the minimum standards guidelines develop further, we would appreciate discussion on how to think carefully through accessibility in terms of mental health and psychosocial needs. That is a very important point, Hannah. And you can see most of the information most of the areas which we covered had to do with the visual aspect of difference in learning. different way in which people learn. So that minimum standard will need to grow to include these other areas and the challenges that are experienced by students and staff with mental health and psychosocial needs. Thanks. Very true. So we're going to note that down. And good thing this is being recorded. So please, yeah. So
I think
please.
also, I think that just to interject there probably quickly, I think also as we move along with UDL, we need to shift from the idea of looking at accommodating the impairment. Let's rather look at creating inclusive space for all, regardless of because now if we think of how can you accommodate this impairment, and because anyway, the impairment on its own has multiple impairment within impairment. I could be blind, also be dyslexic, and also be schizophrenic. And so I think for me, I would really appreciate if when we as colleagues here rethink of UDL, rather look at the student as an individual and look at ways of incorporating or assisting them to be part of the system.
Thanks, Benedict. Very much agree. So it's almost like a back going in and going out. So not to let the support and the thinking around UDL be just impairment specific, but look at it in a broader context of different challenges that students experience, then how that can be. So Genesis, okay, Melissa says, Genesis is working on looking at equity more broadly, and we are trying to focus at inclusion for all students. Yeah, exactly. So it's not just like Benedict said at the beginning, it's not just about students and staff with disabilities, but students across the spectrum who experience challenges. So what you have to know about UDL is that UDL cannot take away every single obstacle which every student has. That is a goal which is not attainable. But what UDL helps do is that it helps to reduce the barrier so much that we'll have less need for specialist support, specialist design and things like that. That's what it does. So you always meet challenge here and there with this or that student, but the thing is that if we continue this journey and implementation of UDL, we will now find hopefully less and less of those challenges for staff members and for students. Tula has done on her video, and I think it's telling me that okay, we have reached the end of it. So Benedict and I are really hoping that this in some way has conveyed meaning to you in terms of the work that we're doing and the direction that we're going to, and yeah, we'll be calling on your engagements further down.
Thank you all for coming and spending that whole hour with us.
Tula, I think you're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you so much for everybody for actively engaging in this webinar. Like we did with the first one, we will share the slides as well as any other resources that Benedict and Ike referenced during the webinars. And we will continue working closely with teaching staff in making sure that their courses are more inclusive and accessible as much as we can. And Janet can also share that there is work that is ongoing on migrating courses from Vula to Amathuba. And we are thinking about accessibility and inclusion very seriously. Thank you.